So we think we're sitting here, listen to these ideas, to see if there's some tools we can take to help us develop our amazing potential. So we can help others. So what we're talking about, the context of this weekend is, well, it says Mahamudra, but it's actually learning to understand Buddha's view about how things exist. And everything we've talked about is about that. So that one way of saying what the whole of Buddhism is about, one take on it, is indeed that it is it's ethics, it's morality, it's the virtue, how to be a good person, as we pointed out. But at the same time, simultaneously, it's a path about how to discover the nature of reality. So it's in that sense, literally, you could say, it's what we mean by science. What is true, what is not, what is reality, what's the nature of things. In that sense, it's also philosophy. So it's not a contradiction. And the source of all of this is the mind. So it's psychology, philosophy, and it's, that's what it is. I'm not asking you to believe it or like it or think about it. No, but that's what it is in reality. It doesn't often appear to us that way. But it's about how things, it's about what is real, what is true, and what is not. And that's a very tricky thing. We're used to the religious one, the God, the Muslim, what? So I'm shouting. As usual. Okay, is that better? Okay, I'll speak softly through the microphone. What?
But if you can speak a little bit slowly.
Oh dear. Okay.
I know it's hard.
No, it is hard, but I will try to remember. Okay. So, okay. Okay. Because Buddha's point is this is the essence of it, which, as I said, is implied by the end result, Sangye, Buddha, your consciousness completely rid of, finished with, gone, annihilated all ego grasping, all the fears, all the delusions, all the not neurotic emotions. That's Buddha's simple, intellectually simple to hear point. Hard to imagine because it's not how we think. And then the development of all the goodness. That's it. So that's, yeah. So one way of saying it all is that Buddha's saying the extent to which our minds are caught up in this fundamental one, this mistaken sense of a separate, lonely, bereft, panic-stricken, fear-based I, which gives rise to the extent to which our minds is full of that, and that's the universe. All beings have that. Then on the basis of this, we have enormous attachment, this emotional hunger, which is called attachment, which causes us to feel we never have enough, no matter what we get, it's never enough, which then is a junkie that craves to get what that fantasy I wants every millisecond, believing that that will bring the satisfaction and the happiness, so we always feel that we are lacking. Then anger and panic and aversion and despair and depression or guilt, a whole spectrum of all those are the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants or when it gets what it doesn't want. This is samsara. This is suffering. This is how Buddha says we all live, to one degree or another. And then these give rise to all the other nonsense. So, Buddha's saying the extent to which we have that stuff in our mind is the extent to which, one, we are miserable. We are suffering. Two, is the extent to which we are also, this is the point about, is the extent to which we are delusional. We are not in touch with reality at various levels. These are the two consequences. And these are indicated by these two main terms for these unhappy states of mind. Disturbing emotions, that's the suffering right now, and delusional, they're misconceptions. When we can understand that point, how all these unhappy emotions, as we call them, are rooted in, underpinned by, informed by conceptual thoughts deep in our bones. And these are misconceptions, literally wrong views about how things exist. That's the way they function. So the extent to which we're caught up in those is the extent to which I'm suffering, and the extent to which is the source of the suffering, that I'm not living in reality, and therefore the extent to which we harm others. And therefore, because of the way all these things leave seeds in our mind, this is the view of karma, how we produce our future suffering. We literally produce ourselves. Karma's self-creation, as the Dalai Lama put it, like speaking loosely, you know. Of course, the actual technical process of how this occurs is extremely, it has to be sophisticated, it's astonishing. So all we're learning here is the principles, you know. And it's a natural law. Buddha didn't make it up. He's not a creator. He's not speculating. No one revealed it to him. And he says, here's my methodology. Over to you if you want to follow it and take it on board and test it and practice it and therefore verify it and therefore experience it one step at a time. That's it. So he's saying, in other words, okay, so another way to put it all, another way to frame it all is all in terms of getting rid of suffering and getting happiness. That's exactly also what the entire Buddhist path is. So where wisdom comes into it, dealing with how things are, reality, is the extent to which we're caught up in the nonsense, is the extent to which we are suffering. Therefore, the solution to get happiness is to get rid of the delusions, to start being in touch with reality. So being in touch with reality is the source of happiness. Now that's not how we think in the West, because we know you can be a genius mathematician, you can be a genius mathematician, or architect, or musician, or scientist, or anything, but be utterly miserable. That's the crucial difference with the Buddha. There's an absolute relationship between happiness and wisdom with the Buddha. You can't separate them. This is the interesting point. That's his deal. That's his trip. So the way to get happiness is to get wisdom. And the way to get happiness also at the same time is to practice virtue. Because non-virtue, harming others, is based upon delusions and the fantasy of an I that's separate. So they're all linked together. They all come together, totally. They're all linked, you know. So Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology, Buddhist metaphysics, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist practice, Buddhist view of the universe all come together as one coherent whole. Okay, it might not seem evident immediately, obviously. That's up to us to find out. If we want to study the whole thing, you know, that's up to us. Practice the whole thing, that's up to us. So this is what we're talking here is, as I said in the very beginning, the night we started quoting from Lama Yeshe's book on Mahamudra, in all this system, this Tibetan Buddhist system coming from India, you know, there's two main approaches to becoming this Sangye. The one we're discussing most of the weekend is the first one. You first listen to the theories, you think about them, and then through meditation, you internalize it. Which is, as I explained, how you learn 1 + 1 is 2, how you learn anything. You listen to the theories, you think it through for it to be coherent, and then you practice it until eventually it's become experiential. That's the classic approach. Now, you know, then this other one, which sort of on the face of it, if we simply compare them as methods, which is not the right way, the other one obviously seems to be a simple choice. You don't have to learn all the theories. You don't have to learn all the philosophy. You sit down, cross your legs, not your eyes, cross your legs, and meditate. Oh, I'd rather have that one, please. I'd rather have Mahamudra. Can I do Mahamudra instead? That's how we think, you know. Can I give up all my other practices and just do Mahamudra or Dzogchen? Well, as Lama Yeshe says, well, you know, if you have concentration, if you've already controlled your mind, if you've already subdued your delusions, if you've already got some semblance of wisdom, and you can meditate and have bliss 24 hours a day, yeah, no problems. You don't need to do anything else because you're on the way, babe. Like I said, one Lama whose main thing was Dzogchen. Years and years of practicing Dzogchen with his students. Finally he said, I've got to start at the basics again. You're just not getting it, you know. So actually Mahamudra and Dzogchen that appear on the surface to be simple. You learn to concentrate, you focus on your mind, and then you think about emptiness, which we're going to talk about now. It seems easy, uncomplicated, but it's misleading, you know. It's actually a highly advanced It's a technique for highly advanced practitioners. Everybody can practice it, but to actually get the realizations from it, pretty outrageous, pretty marvellous. But nevertheless, still, we can say there are two main kinds of practitioners. We all need both, but at different times we need different approaches. So they say the ones with sharp wisdom actually would be the ones who would do the theory, then thinking, and then meditating. The other one is for people, no, it's not criticising, it's just different styles of people. Many of my friends who Kagyu, like I said, they come into this life, and this is the point, you have to assume karma here. They come into this life with lots of faith in the teachings, lots of, obviously, imprints from having done it before. And they leap straight into their practices, their nondros, their prostrations, and their this, and their visualizations, and their mantras. They never hear any philosophy. They don't care. They have faith in Buddhism, and then they meditate. Then you've got the Gelugpas, as Lama Yeshe says, people accuse us of squeezing our brains. The intellectuals. Both are necessary. We need both aspects, and sometimes in our day, I'm running out of battery again. Sometimes in our day we don't have to do the theoretical. Sometimes it's experiential. The way you work with yourself. Just cut to the chase. Other times you've got to be using logic. So we've got to know how to use these tools properly and not mystify them and not misconceive these approaches, So now with Mahamudra, we started the evening. We did it a little bit. So it's yeah, I'll wait. So like 3 seconds. Okay, good. Thank you. Nothing, no. Not happening. Well, let's, how dare it? A few seconds. So, okay, so basically it's, let me just read you some Lama again. This is his inspiring words, better than mine. Because we've only done the first point, the first stage. Okay. So I didn't finish all the advantages, did I, of having a single point of concentration? Let me get you excited. I'll tell you some more things. No, I didn't. Let me say some more. The advantages of single point of concentration, which is this first technique the amazing Indians invented, which is certainly then, they had all their philosophy, their views, but you can practically say that the peak of this subtle absorption in this technique, you can almost think it is like liberation. It's so astonishing. But for the Buddha, it's really clear what you're doing is developing your mind as an incredible instrument of clarity in the first mode. It indeed does bring its own advantages, which are marvellous, but you haven't got the wisdom yet. You've got to use it in the second mode of meditation to, quote-unquote, realise emptiness, see reality. But the advantages of achieving this samadhi. Samadhi is a Sanskrit word that refers to the state of concentration. Shamatha is the Sanskrit word that refers to the technique itself, single point of concentration. In Tibetan it's called shine. Okay. Like I said, your mind becomes non-conceptual. You experience bliss. See, that point is fascinating. This is a really fascinating point. As I've been saying from Lama, and what Buddha's saying is, of course, Lama speaking Buddhism, is that your consciousness, this clear, non-physical capacity for cognition. That's what mind is. Its function is to cognize, to be aware, to know. As I said, obviously the question is know what? To know reality, to know how things exist. So, the point is this, and we can experience the truth of this. You wake up one day, you're feeling anxious, a bit angry, a bit depressed, a bit jealous, isn't it? Utterly miserable. It naturally just plain miserable. And then one day you wake up, you're feeling a bit more light, relaxed, it's kind of, things are, trigger kind of joy, a bit pleased, a bit happy in your mind. So it's sort of stating the obvious, but this is Buddha's point. The extent to which our minds are not depressed, angry, jealous, so on and so forth, is logically the extent to which we are happy and spacious. So happy is bliss, ecstasy, rapture, words Lama used, are just extreme versions of happy, are they not? That's all. That's it. So the extent to which our minds are unencumbered by the junk is the extent to which our mind is blissful. This is the logic of Buddha's view. So that's the job, getting rid of the delusions. And that doesn't just mean waking up one day and feeling happy, oh, now I did it, you know? No, you've got to learn to know how to do it all the time. One of our biggest misconceptions about spiritual is we want an experience. We want to go to meditation and have tears of compassion. Oh, wow, I just had an experience of compassion. Well, then your husband shouts at you and you get upset. Where's your compassion? It's momentary, because you haven't learned the technique of how to get it and have it continuously all the time. That's what it is. So Buddhist teachings are techniques to how to cultivate it all the time. So that's how we think of spiritual experiences is you go, because you're a bit of a feeling for music, you sit at the piano, you don't know theory, but you put your hands on the piano and a lovely tune can come out. We do this, we can fiddle around with the notes and play a very pleasant tune. And you just say you had a really wonderful musical experience, and you did. So then I say to you, please play it again. Oh no, I can't do that. And that's how we think of spiritual. It's something that just sort of comes and then goes, like a vision or a moment of it. This is complete superstition. It's nice to have a moment of something, but what if it's stable in you? You can do it every time. But we don't think there are techniques. So if you want to learn playing music, you've got a tendency. You go start playing the theories, then you can play it every time, and now you've internalized it. That's the Buddha's approach. So you can have a lovely feeling of compassion, which shows you've got a tendency to be compassionate, but you have to learn the techniques of how to have it all the time until eventually it is your true nature. That's another point. But back to this one, the joy, happiness, whatever words you want, are, the way Buddha says, the natural state of mind when the delusions, even temporarily, are not there. That we can prove every day. The extent to which you're not anxious, not angry, not depressed, not jealous, is the extent to which your mind is peaceful and content and relatively happy. That's the logic. So all Buddha's methods are ways to completely eradicate the rubbish, therefore eradicate suffering, and therefore get bliss naturally all the time. It's natural. One of our monks, a Swiss monk, Venerable Rene, you ever invited him here? You know who I'm talking about? Okay. He's a meditator. 30 years meditator. I think he's a... Pardon?
This is why he didn't come. We invited him. He said, I'm in 1 year.
Okay, well, we'll keep inviting him. No, he's a serious meditator. I think he must be a bodhisattva. Swiss monk. Extraordinary man. Serious meditator, 30, 40 years now. Humble. I mean, I don't know, what do I know, but it seems like he's a holy man, you know, I would really say. And incredible to have teach meditation. Because he's experienced yogi. I remember he told me, I interviewed him when I first edited Mandala magazine, of our organisation, back in the 90s. I interviewed him, 95 I think. And already that time he'd been meditating off and on for 12 or 14 years, you know. 20 years maybe, can't remember. Anyway, the point is, normally you'd never talk about your experiences, and that's appropriate, but I think it's very powerful sometimes to hear experiences, especially of people in our own culture who aren't Asian, because we mystify the Asians, you know, they're the ones who are yogis. You know, not at all, I tell you, there's extraordinary practitioners now. So it's really powerful and encouraging to hear their experiences. So I interviewed him about one of his many, he was a Czech, he took a single point of concentration. So as you know, as I've described, it's described in terms of 9 stages, and then all the texts, right? So he told me in this 18-month retreat, it was in our centre in Spain. It was where Lama Ursel, who's Lama Yeshe's reincarnation, was born. This little, out of Granada, up in the mountains, you know, and His Holiness, when Lama Yeshe invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Europe, one of the many people who invited in 1982. And at that time Lama Yeshe invited 10 of his students, 5 men and 5 women, to be security guards for His Holiness, and I was one of them. Anyway, it was wonderful, travelling around with His Holiness. And Lama made us wear uniforms. So we had these uniforms, like skirts and all the nuns as well, and I had hair, and I thought I better look like a proper lady, so I wore lipstick, you know, had like nice boots and everything. Mum used to always laugh and say, "You like me better like that." You know? Anyway, we were, His Holiness, we travelled around with him in Europe, and he was at Urseling, the place of clear light. And so that's why they named Lama Yeshe's reincarnation, when he was born, Ursel. And His Holiness named us that in 1982. And His Holiness was there. And he named it Urseling, place of clear light. And he said it reminded him of Tibet. It's beautiful, up in the mountains, so clear, so pristine. So anyway, Venerable Rene was meditating there for 18 months in one of his many retreats. And he told me something like this. He said roughly something like, he said he just touched upon the 5th of these 9 stages of cultivation. And we're talking 18 months, and we're talking serious 12 hours a day meditating. I mean, serious. And to even, the qualifications you need even to get to do serious long-term retreat, you're already a highly realised being. It's so intense, you know, extraordinary, extraordinary. So anyway, he said he maybe just touched upon the 5th of the 9 stages. And he said something like this, something like the joy, the peace, and hear those words literally, please. That his mind experienced, he experienced, was so superior to any kind of joy he'd ever experienced through his senses. And when we think about it, when we think of happiness, the only way we know how to access any happiness is by having contact with objects of the senses. That's just who we are. That's what samsara is, Buddha says, you know. We know we can have a happy mind one day without the chocolate cake, but it just doesn't, we don't quite know why it comes, and it just sort of flits away again, you know. So we really do equate happiness with what you get when you get the nice sense object. That's just how we are. So this is Buddha's point. Very simple. It's not moralistic, it's not religious, it's practical. He says he's discovered, and again these Indians have discovered it, from this extraordinary technique, that just developing the discipline to subdue the grosser level in a very focused, clear, conscious, awake way. So even temporarily, because the delusions are temporarily ceased, that's why Mahamudra, this is so powerful, meditating on your mind, when your mind gets more subtle, it's naturally blissful. Naturally blissful. So it's there within us. Whereas we are completely addicted to believing that happiness, the only way you get it is by getting the object. We don't know how to trigger it in our own mind, in other words. Because we don't even think of it as a characteristic of our mind. If we think of our mind as our brain, we don't think of it as having the potential to be blissful, do we? Because our whole model is about the physical. I'm not criticising it. That's why this Buddha's view is so different. If we think the mind is the brain, and we understand the senses, then naturally we have to get the object to put the cake in the mouth, to touch the tongue, to trigger the pleasant feeling. That's the method we use. Well, that's what Buddha calls samsara. He's not being rude about it. He says, fine, but it won't last. You've got to work really hard to have those few moments of pleasure. Then if you keep eating it, you're going to vomit. So it's a really difficult kind of a scenario, you know. It's kind of tricky. Well, he says, here, honeys, I've got a method for you. You can have bliss all the time. And don't think of it as religion, it's practical. It's just hard, that's all. Because our mind is naturally blissful, naturally clear, naturally virtuous, and naturally wise. All of those qualities are the nature of mind to the extent that it's unencumbered by the junk. That's Buddha's view. And I said, so, and the next one is you experience bliss. I said that. As you said, in the beginning, this is in the meditation itself, the bliss you experience is physical, which is the grosser level. Now, if we think of the best sex in the universe, which is the best way we tend to think of bliss, isn't it? I mean, that's the best method we seem to have, is, you know, having contact with it. We call it sexual. That's still physical. It's still physical. It seems so abstract to us to think of bliss going beyond the physical, because we don't posit even that as existing. So in the subtle state of concentration, you experience bliss, ecstatic bliss, just naturally. The more concentration you have, the subtler you get. The more integrated you are, thus the more rapture, the more bliss you experience. Naturally. So the point is, basically now we're junkies. Attachment is a junkie. It is frantic. I have to keep reading. I have to just keep talking. Okay. So listen. This is samsara. I remember Lama Zopa said one time, well, first of all, Lama Yeshe said, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. We will never begin to comprehend it until we start going deeply inside. Now that sounds shocking to us because we think, oh yeah, I'm attached, I like cake, I'm attached, I like sex. But it's the grossest understanding of it. And we assume it's a normal thing. And we don't think it's suffering because we're not in touch with our minds. That's why Lama said that. Lama Zopa said one time, and this is very shocking, this first stages of practice, the wisdom wing, the main realization we'll get from here is what they call renunciation. This is being compassionate to yourself. So renunciation is two parts. One, you know you are suffering. First noble truth. We'll describe this framework in a minute. 3 levels of suffering. And 2, you got hit the jackpot. You now know the causes, karma and delusions. So now you're on a roll. Now you know what to do to stop suffering. So renunciation, as Lama Zopa says, you've got it when just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive, so disgusting. It's like being in a septic tank. So that's laughable to us. What is he talking about? We don't even know the meaning of Buddha's view of attachment. We don't even we know we live in it, but because we're all living in it, it's like we're all living in a pigsty, and no one has anything but a pigsty, where pigs live, with all the shit and the yuck and the urine, the smell. Everybody lives in it, but therefore it's all we know. So no one has anything to compare it with. Therefore, that's what we call happiness. We get the best corner of the shit over there. That's my piece of shit over there. Go away. Leave my piece of corner shit alone, I mean, I know it sounds gross how I'm talking. We've got to get... And it is all just comparative. That's why, as Renee said, even the most joy he'd ever experienced through his senses, this, in his own mind, was superior. And that's being humble, how he's talking. And that bliss is utterly peaceful, not frantic, which is the bliss we have because we're junkies. The next heading, as if you could count every atom. As your concentration gets stronger and you reach ever subtler levels, your mind becomes super powerful. From his own experience, Lama Tsongkhapa says that you can reach a point of such clarity in your meditation that your mind feels almost infinite. Your mind is so clear, so sharp, it's as if you can distinguish all the subtle physical energies. You'll have the courageous thought, I can count all the atoms of the universe. This level of mind is more powerful than even scientific instruments. Now I think I'm showing pride in Buddhism, he says. So that's literally, they say, the level of clarity of the yogi's mind. That means, that's why they at an ordinary level, like I talked about the little boy, when the doctor said, oh yeah, that's how yogis behave. He shows what we would say is a genius intelligence, like with science and math and whatever. This capacity to hold an enormous amount of clear detail in the mind. Now, we are very familiar with that with some geniuses. But the Buddhist point is, have that on its own, that's like hell. You go mad. People go mad. Remember that movie, Russell Crowe? Beautiful Mind. It's like he was a maniac. He was really mentally suffering. He was seriously up and down like a yo-yo, mentally suffering. That means that Buddhists use lots of delusions, lots of attachment, lots of craziness, unable to have any control over it, but at the same time this genius, what we would call intellect. Well, for the Buddha, this is wisdom and virtue have to come together. It's bizarre and unbalanced. To have genius intellect, which we can have, that's wisdom, without the virtue. And that's what yoga's about. That's what we can all accomplish. This genius capacity for vast, simple knowledge, but based, rooted in morality, rooted in virtue and compassion. That's the two wings of the bird. So of course, because he's a clever scientist, we think